All right, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We will make a start to our second session of the day here at MBA Beef Expo. The Farmers Weekly and NBA have worked on a piece of research, and this session is going to be looking at the findings of that, having a discussion on it. So, my name is Andrew Meredith. I'm Farmers Weekly editor. I've been working at Farmers Weekly since 2016, and I was a beef and sheep farmer in Mid Wales before that. And I read in the AHDB data pack from a few weeks ago that the average beef consumption per head in the United Kingdom has now just about slipped under 10 kilograms annually. So it's pleasing to be in a room and with a panel who have already hit their target for this year, I'm sure. So, MBA asked us to do some research to look at the state of the nation, the state of beef farming, the state of the sector. And we're very pleased that over 1,000 of you responded. We've got some very interesting findings to look through today. I think it's fair to say that we are a sector in flux. We have a big chunk scaling up. We have a big chunk scaling back. We've got concerns about profitability, even as prices are pretty good. We've got cash flow concerns, and I think above all, for a multitude of reasons, people are fearful for the future, and that really came out in that first session too. There's a lot of political concerns, but it doesn't stop there. There's farmgate concerns as well, I would say. So before I quickly run through the findings and leave some of those up on the screen to drive our discussion today, let me just introduce our expert panel. We have John Powell on the end there from DEFRA. He's the head of agricultural sectors, a veteran of many a political spat, I'm sure, John, and you'll be telling us later when you're going to be bringing headage payments to England, I believe. So we look forward to that. Then we've got Sarah Haire from Dunbia. You're head of agriculture. Very pleased to have you representing the supply chain, Sarah, and you'll be telling us what the beef price is in 6 months' time, I'm sure. And we've got we've doubled up. We've doubled the ration of KW feed reps on the panel today. We have Tom here and Stuart on the end, the Gordon Ramsay and Jamie Oliver of ration formulation. So we look forward to hearing what they have to say, their perspective, working with a lot of businesses. And we've got, representing the MBA, we've got Ben Harman, the MBA Vice Chair and a Charolais farmer. Sorry to hear that. But the Max Verstappen of spreadsheets, I'm told. Hopefully you'll be making that not too double Dutch for us later. And then Meleri, Mel Griffith from Herdwatch, who will be here telling you to part with your cash for some data capture tools. So an experienced panel, a panel that represents a big chunk of the supply chain, I'm sure you agree. So let me run through those findings first before we hear from them very quickly indeed, hopefully. First of all, just a quick look at the respondent profile, just to really hone in on the fact that we had a good response rate from across the sector. We are quite a fragmented sector in some respects, aren't we? But it was good to see we had some responses both from suckler producers, expert finishers, and others. And as I said in my opening remarks, I think one of the headline findings was that we have had a lot of individual businesses seeking to grow their herd in the last 5 years, which surely is a sign of optimism among some. And big growth, too. Of the 1 in 3 farmers who've grown their herd, the average increase has been by 45%, which will surely have presented some management challenges for some of those businesses, and hopefully we'll discuss that. But also decline. So people are heading in different directions, and we've seen folk decline by big numbers as well, and hopefully we'll tackle some of the reasons why that is happening and how it is not always defeat, how to do it well and for the right reasons. We are still, I'm sure, as you will see from your travelling here this morning, a nation that is brilliant at growing grass, so it is no surprise that we are still predominantly pasture-based, although with many other types of system too, particularly at the finishing end, I'm sure. And we have changes of all types, not just in scale, but in how they are marketing. How respondents have been marketing cattle, some choosing more on the dead, some choosing more on the live. A mixed picture there, I would say, but remarkable that perhaps only half are still doing it the same as they were doing 5 years ago. 8 out of 10 recording some KPIs, and calving ease squeezing in at the top there as the most important metric, which is brilliant to hear. We'll keep the vets out of business in that regard if we can, make things a lot simpler. But 1 in 5, only 1 in 5, are using a formal data capture tool. So a big market opportunity, but a big challenge for those firms perhaps that are seeking to muscle their way in there. Those who are not using data capture tools, why not? Some of them simply not interested, some not seeing the value. We'll discuss that, I'm sure, and whether that is a viewpoint that can hold. And here is a troubling statistic, though perhaps one that won't surprise you. 1/3 of farm businesses have no succession plan in place at the moment, and indeed another 1/5, they're talking about it, but they haven't got it fully sorted. So perhaps you could say there is half of the sector that don't quite know what is happening to the next generation. And so that is definitely a challenge for longevity. Ask folk what was the biggest challenge in the next 2 years. I think big segments there saying obviously the input costs, but the beef price, although it's riding high, are still featuring there. So I'm sure perhaps that some of that is fears that it will fall in time rather than stay where it is. And a lot are not seeing where the opportunities are going to come from. But opportunities there are, as I'm sure our panel will agree, and we'll dive into what some of those are, hopefully. As alluded to in the first session, a UK-level agricultural policy is the favour of the majority. I'm sure we're hearing from our Welsh farmers in particular there that their dissatisfaction has been expressed in that, perhaps, as they're looking across the border, but maybe others in other areas too. 3 in 10, as you can see, only 3 in 10 are confident that their devolved nation's agricultural policy will help deliver on aspects of farming. Not a lot of optimism out there, and that was reflected in the questions in the first session. So maybe we'll come on to the politics if the questioners from the audience would like that, but maybe we'll deal a bit more in the farm level issues in this session. 2 in 5 believe that integrated beef schemes represent an opportunity for my business. So 61% disagree with that statement. That is an interesting statistic indeed. 9 in 10 are managing price and cost volatility there by cutting their they are managing price and cost volatility, I should say, and the most common way of doing that has been by cutting inputs. Whether that is sustainable or not in the longer term is a very good question. And we do have profitable businesses in the sector. We have some people that are doing okay, and that is something that farmers have always struggled to admit, isn't it, perhaps? But there are, I think it was 39% that say they make a profit every year. But of course, there is a big chunk there who are not. Over half the market are now selling deadweight, although I think we have seen statistics, have we not, in the last 12, 18 months that show that a modest return to the live ring. I think auctioneers have been reporting some rise in throughputs. And almost half of those who are selling deadweight are doing it through one sole processor. Not a lot of interest in marketing cooperatives. 2/3 saying they're unlikely to choose a route for that, whether that is because there is not a business offering that in their area or whether they believe that it is not fit for purpose remains to be seen. And back to the traits, growth rate, one of the most important, of course it is, and fertility there in second place. The size of this screen down here, I really should have brought my glasses. I'm so glad I read this survey beforehand. Growth rate, shape and conformation, ease of fleshing or forage when buying. Again, I think that those are long-term trends. And of course, our beef farmer respondents are likely to agree that beef production is part of the solution, and suckler beef, bred beef is better than dairy beef. I'm not sure all of our panelists would agree with that, so that's an interesting one. But government policy, we're back to the topic of session one, seen as the biggest threat to beef enterprises. And I think that is something that is a challenge to the sector, isn't it? Because of course there are many concerns with what is happening and what is not happening at a government level, but it should not distract us, I suppose, either from seeking to keep an eye also on the farm level challenges as well and what is under our direct control. But there laid bare is why so many are worried about government policy, and we'll come on to that straight away, I think, when we finish this presentation. 2/3 think their businesses will only survive with difficulty once area payments are gone. Of course, in England, they are being drained away most rapidly, but they are not by any means safe in the long term in some of the devolved nations either. And then lifestyle. It's an important component of a longevity in the business and succession too. So we asked about holiday days as a metric of satisfaction with the business as well. And some interesting, I thought there was another slide there, forgive me. And interesting that I think it was only about 10 days was the average that a farmer is taking of a beef farmer's taking of holidays annually, but they had an aspiration to take 18. So is that gap between the reality and the aspiration why some farming folk, some farming families are struggling to bring people into the business? Perhaps it is. And then here are those family members in the business. They are contributing an awful lot. Unpaid family labour is propping up and helping an awful lot of businesses to make a living in general. And how long can that be sustainable for as well, I wonder. So there we are, a very whistle-stop tour through the findings. I'm going to leave them up on screen. The floor is now open for questions, but I just wanted to kick things off with our panellists. Let's bring it back to those area payments being taken away and the difficulty in managing a business without that safety net. Despite that, we are still seeing a big chunk of farmers grow their business, or perhaps in response to it. So who would like to speak to a business that they've seen who is managing that well, and what are those expanding businesses doing? What are the opportunities that they're seeking to extract by growing? Ben, perhaps you kick us off there as the farming voice on the panel.
All right, thanks, Andrew. I think if you look at the results early on in the survey, what we're seeing is an industry in flux. There's no real clear division between farmers are getting bigger, farmers are getting smaller, farmers selling live, farmers selling dead. People are changing, and they're changing just because trying something is better than trying nothing. So in a time of great change is also a time of great opportunity. And when we look at some of the farmers in the UK, especially the first and second generation farms, they're expanding massively and they're running their businesses really well. The businesses that I believe are struggling, or I see are struggling, are those that are a little bit set in their ways and doing things the same way as they've always done them before. So I like the fact that we see an industry in flux. I think people will find their way, and people need to be willing to change.
And is there a particular segment of the beef sector then that you're seeing that growth? Is it sucklers? Is it the finishers? Where is that growth happening?
Well, beef from the dairy herd is what now accounts for about 60% of the beef sold in the UK. I don't see that increasing massively. I think that's probably reached more or less a plateau now. And we're seeing the integrated model in beef from the dairy herd, and that is suiting people. People who can know what their cost base is before they start. I think it's the suckler end of the industry that is really beginning to struggle a little bit. Suckler cow numbers are down. There is a huge amount of pressure on the industry from both legislators in parts of the UK and also from the media and some commentators. So I think it's the suckler people that need looking after in particular at the moment.
Okay. Sarah, what type of businesses are you seeing growing, upping the numbers? And who is doing it well?
I think it's hard to say any particular sector because, as you say, there's quite a range of activity happening at farm level. I think the big challenge at the suckler end is probably the efficiency of the suckler herd and suckler cow in particular. I think there's opportunities there that some of the, I suppose, farmers that are more set in their ways, perhaps not as open to change as we would probably like them to be going forward. You're dealing with smaller farmers, but they're still the backbone of whatever else happens up the supply chain. The finishers can get bigger, it's great, but they still need that raw material coming in the first place. So we're trying to see a bit of that, I suppose, longer term vision coming into what we're doing. Also the dairy herd side of things, that is growing. I think it's still got a little way to go. But it's making sure that people are making the right business choices for their system, looking at everything about it. I mean, this survey has gone through everything from production system, but also lifestyle. And I think that's really key, that farmers have the choice to make whatever decisions they want, but with the right tools available to them. And I think we need to make sure that farmers have the right support around them for whatever decision they need to make, with the key on the end product. We still need a consistent product going to our consumers.
So have we reached the peak of supply that the dairy side can put into the beef system, or is there a long way to go yet?
I don't think we quite have. I think the reality is there's so many dairy cows.
Yeah.
They can only have one calf per cow per year. So that's really where our ceiling comes, is how efficient can the dairy herd get with their replacements and the longevity of the cow at that end, as to what the opportunity is then for dairy beef to come into the beef supply chain. But I think we need to probably forget a little bit of the dairy beef versus the suckler beef argument, because beef is beef. And when a consumer picks up that pack on the shelf, they are expecting the same eating quality experience time after time, unless there's a USP the other end to give them that confidence of quality or whatever else that goes with it.
What are the type of farms that you're seeing in growth and doing it well?
The ones I'm seeing growing are those mainly with a working capital to do it in the first place. They've got access to the money, they've got access to the land to be able to expand and focus upon efficiencies through scale of production. The main things they're focusing on to get that growth and efficiency is managing their cost risk and exposure. So whether that's through improving forage quality at home or looking at other ways of feeding the cattle, sourcing the cattle and marketing the cattle, are the ones I'm seeing that are growing. It's the people who you alluded to before, Ben, that are stuck in their ways, and we've always done it this way for 20 years. The guys who are really under pressure.
Yeah, absolutely.
John, there's been an awful lot of work at DEFRA looking at fairness in the supply chain in other sectors. I think the Minister said earlier that he was hoping to do it for beef and lamb in due course. It must be a concern that 2/3 of farms in this sector can't survive, they say, or will only survive with difficulty without area payments. Is there a bigger role for government here, or is the market solving this with the price going up?
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for running the survey with the MBA. I think it's really helpful to have an industry-driven survey. It's more likely to tell the truth, so it's really helpful to have had the responses and to be able to think about those. Obviously, from DEFRA's perspective, and as has been mentioned in the session earlier, a lot of change has happened the last few years in terms of the policies that we now are implementing in agriculture, the whole shift from the former Common Agricultural Policy direct payments, the 7-year transition, the move to the combination of the SFI, the capital grants offer and the pathway. First, to address your first point, supply chain reviews. We obviously have looked at dairy, at pork, at horticulture, and have just started on poultry. That does leave, and eggs, of course, we've already done. That does leave a gap, of course, as beef and lamb is the one that's outstanding. Ministers have asked us now to start looking at the beef and lamb sector. Obviously, the priority was mainly driven by the industry up to now. But we are conscious beef and lamb is a gap, so we are actively now looking at whether there is a case. I'm not going to reveal at this point that we will proceed or not, but we will be talking to the industry in due course as to what the issues are, and this survey will obviously help that. I think what I'd just briefly like to focus on is that although it's clear, and I think we already knew, a large percentage of farmers have always relied on the old BPS payments to remain financially viable. I think that's always been a problem, and I hope that the shift to a more market-orientated focus with support from the government through the various measures will actually give opportunities. Yes, transition means that BPS now, the delinked payments are disappearing. There's still a few years left, of course. But the offer under the SFI is now good. I think for beef farmers, it's a good offer. We've increased the payments. Some of the pasture measures are very good. Secondly, the price, I don't want to just say prices, but I'm trying to find the right word here. The balance between price and cost has improved in recent months. We can't keep relying on that, of course, and that's why, again, the second set of measures, the capital investments, I think, are so important to now invest in slurry management, in new calf handling stores, to be able to make the investment, to make the business this is slightly more profitable over the longer term. And I also think that there are wider opportunities. The export market, I think we have a fantastic product that's high welfare, high environment, that we can export, and opening up more export markets for British beef will give that added value opportunity. So I think it's about individual businesses identifying where they can make changes on farm, and I think it's about the industry more wider working together to brand the product and look for the market opportunities, work with HDB and government, not just through trade deals, but through opening up trade opportunities, which we don't need a trade agreement to do. So I think there are opportunities. It's making sure we can communicate that and make them as accessible as possible. The application processes we're trying to make much more simple. I think it takes 20 minutes now to apply for an SFI application. So how can we just make sure farmers are able to access the Farm Resilience Fund to get that business support, succession, and we may touch on later, is a big issue. How farmers can plan ahead as well, I think is important, to give them that longer term vision for the business, rather than we've lived a bit in the short term, I think, the last few years because of the wider geopolitical issues, COVID, and also just the way the market's been. So I hope there are some opportunities to address that through both what we're funding and through how we can work a bit closer with the industry.
Andrew,
Yes.
I'd just like to challenge John a little bit on something there, which is, I think there is a reasonable viewpoint that farming has never actually been subsidised. Consumers have been subsidised to buy food at below the cost of production. And that's what's kept farmers in business, is giving consumers cheap food. And I think we see food prices rising now, and we see a lot of food banks around, and we see food poverty. And it's really partly off the back of the fact that farmers aren't being subsidised anymore to produce that food below the cost of production. So removing agricultural support and retargeting it isn't really going to help those poorer people who are struggling with their food bills.
Yeah. I don't disagree, to be honest. But first of all, farming was subsidised. The basic land payments gave a subsidy to farmers, and that has distorted the way farming has run, which has led, I think, the consequences of eating cheaper food. There is the whole issue, and our supply chain fairness reviews are looking at that, is actually spreading the cost and the reward across the supply chain is the best route in the longer term. That means all actors having to recognise that and address that. Government has a part to roll in that, but at the end of the day, that is a supply chain issue. At the end of the day, only the market and the supply chains themselves can resolve that conundrum. Government can step in certain places and try to free the market by some form of regulation, as we're looking at, but ultimately the supply chain has to recognise that. And I think we have seen instances with eggs, particularly recently, where retailers perhaps have realised their supply chains are not as secure as they used to be. And I suspect that will become more apparent in the coming years as we see some of the wider issues impacting. And the market will have to react quickly, which isn't used to doing, let's be fair. And I'm quite interested to see the next panel after this as well, to hear some of that debate. So partly yes, and I hear what you say, we can do a bit, but actually the market also has a responsibility here.
Would anyone like to stick their hand in the air yet? Or shall we move on for now? Okay. Yes?
Holding the microphone, so I'm a bit like I've got an advantage here. But I have a question. I don't think you've got it up here, Andrew. But there was a stat in this report along the lines of basically nobody in the industry saw any opportunity in the beef industry going forward. Have you got that stat? What was it? Oh. Sorry, everybody. Trust me to ask a question that's
right?
not.
Sorry, Ed, is it possible?
Yes.
It's quite hard to hear the question from you.
Sorry, I haven't asked it yet. Don't you worry. Right, so what do we do about this? What is everybody's opinion? Because for me, as somebody that would give their right arm to farmers, grown up in farming but has not yet found a way to get into it, how do we change the mindset of these people that cannot see the opportunities? And if they're not going to change the mindset, how do we get rid of them so that other people can come in and have a go? What's everybody's opinion on that? Because that was soul-destroying to me to see that. Like, I couldn't believe it.
Mindset shift. Stuart.
It's a huge question, and how to answer it's going to be difficult because there will be difficult answers. If someone is set in their ways, are they going to change? Is it a succession plan that's going to change it? And is that succession plan going to allow them to change it? Are they going to fund it? Is the bank going to support them? Is the mum and dad going to support them? And it's how that's going to change. And that can only change with people looking at other options. But it's how big an option it's going to look at. And at the end of the day, the biggest factor for everybody involved in this industry is getting someone to buy that plastic tray of beef. And buy it a second time, a third time, a fourth time, and a fifth time. So it's got to be consistent, it's got to be cost effective, it's got to be affordable, but it's got to be done in a way that's efficient. We can't do it at a loss. You've not got charity numbers under your holding number, so it's got to be done efficiently and drive performance, and that can only be done through change. So some people are seeing that change and implementing it by increasing numbers. We've seen suckler herd numbers increase, and those that are lucky enough to do it are doing it. But there's a lot that are restricted. We've got 20, 30, 40, 100 cows. They can't do any more because the acres won't allow it. Are they going to get finance to do something else? Or are they going to bring something into those empty sheds through the summer? And that's where the possible integrated beef schemes come in. So they're increasing numbers, increasing turnover, which then increases profit, which then increases reinvestment and helps succession plan to come back through. But it's such a hard question to answer, a fantastic question, and everybody should be looking at it. How are we going to develop our unit, and who's next?
Mel, you look at obviously a lot of data from Herdwatch, and do you look at amalgamated statistics of how the industry is performing? Or I guess my question is, is the average still too sluggish? When you think of the dairy sector, you have that annual improvement in a lot of businesses. Is that being seen in the dairy sector, and if not, why not in beef?
Yeah, so the dairy sector in my opinion, they're a lot more open to collecting that data and actually using and interpreting that data to make changes to their business, whereas the beef sector is a bit more hesitant. Not sure if it probably isn't, but data's not sexy, data's not cool. And for the beef specifically, it takes a lot of time to see any return on that data. So if we're talking about calving ease, for instance, you're only having a calf every year, whereas dairy, it's all about milk production. You're milking every single day, so you are going to see that up and down. But the beef guys need to start using that as an opportunity to improve their sort of business.
It's hard to see the opportunity, I suppose. The point is, isn't it, Ben, if you don't understand your business well enough?
It is. So there's a couple of really significant problems here, and what, for the suckler industry. And one is that the dairy industry, as Mel said, are very good at measuring things. And the beef from the dairy herd has been measured really accurately by over a number of years by some fairly big players. So they have made strident increases in daily live weight gain in beef off dairy. And where the suckler producers, there is a negativity towards performance recording in a section of the suckler industry who still prefer to buy with their eyes and not with data. But that is holding back the suckler industry from getting higher performance rates. That negativity about performance recording is misplaced, because if objective measures are made, then improvements can be made. And you can't manage what you don't measure. And a lot of suckler producers aren't measuring enough.
And what is the key metrics in your business?
So I focus a lot on calving ease, but I do that by gestation length to a greater extent. So I want short gestation length cattle, but I also need fast growth rate cattle. So what I'm looking for really is a low birth weight and a high weaning weight. And we achieve that, and we sell semen off the back of that, because we measure accurately, not in order that we can sell produce, bulls. We measure accurately in order that our business can be stronger. And because of that, we do sell bulls and semen. But you have to be measuring for yourself rather than measuring for some perceived benefit in the marketplace.
Do you want to come back on that at all? Okay. Any further questions? Tom, just thinking about the short-term outlook for a minute rather than the long-term. We've seen straw prices going through the roof, other input costs such as grain starting to edge up. What is the sort of outlook for the summer, and how are farmers sort of thinking about that at the moment?
The interesting one you touched on there is straw. Obviously, a lot of finishing cattle are bedded down on straw. I don't see so many slats where I work. The straw prices are rumour mill. I've heard everywhere from £110 per tonne for wheat delivered up to £220 per tonne for wheat straw delivered. At that higher price, people cannot afford to bed the cattle on it. Now, we'll be all right at the minute where you can turn cattle out in the summer, but when we get to the winter, if your bedding costs are going to be triple what they've normally been, if straw's going to be in short supply because the barley hasn't got in the ground, crops haven't been in great condition, it's not there. I've got clients sort of saying we're going to cut numbers back by 30% this winter because I can't afford to buy the straw in on a wagon to bed them. The same thing when you look at feed input costs. We're starting to see cereals rise coming off the back of weather concerns and scares in North America and in particularly Europe, in particular Russia. There's a rumour out there at the minute that we're about to lose 90 million metric tonnes of wheat growth from Russia this season, which, you know, we've got wheat prices and barley prices that have been the lowest they've been in nearly 5 years and have been there for the past couple of months. It's below the cost of production for many arable farmers throughout the world. It can only really, in my opinion, go one way from an energy side. Soya and proteins. Now, there's a lot of... I use soya as the benchmark for proteins in the world. It's the big one, and as much as we're trying to move away from it, and hopefully we will get away from it, it's still the benchmark. The soya price is under downward pressure at the minute. There's a lot of it in the world. We are seeing a slight rise at the minute as crushers switch from rape into soya to follow the oil price that's rising. But fundamentally, soya is still in the weather market before we get to the South American harvest with a lot of downward pressure on it. So my 2 pence on feed at the minute is look at securing your energies, your cereals, and just perhaps hold off on the proteins and move that way.
Are you forecasting an increase in costs for the integrated groups?
it's the crystal ball side of things. I mean, the volatility we've seen over the last few years has been unprecedented, and I think trying to forecast anything forward is a challenge. You only look at what weather's doing. I think the first hint of sun today that I've seen for a long time. But what's really key is how all the sectors interact with each other these days. Used to be one was doing well, the other one wasn't quite so well, but actually there's more sharing of some of the pain and gain across the board. So looking forward, I mean, integrated schemes out there that we're involved with, very much grass-based, and that's the key to a lot of this. Grass has got to be the cheapest form of feed there, but we've also got to get the right genetics onto that grass, manage that grass correctly to manage the risks as much as we can.
And that's a key thing you touched on there, saying manage that grass correctly. I do a lot of work within the dairy sector where in the past 10 years I've seen forage quality, be it grazed forage or conserved forage, come on massively. And yet in the beef sector there still seems to be an attitude with a lot of my customers and people I speak to of let's just produce one big heap, maybe two big cuts, because they perceive the foraging and the harvesting cost is cheaper to have two big heaps of what is often 10 ME, 12 crude protein, high NDF, undigestible rubbish that's, from a nutrition point of view, is holding a lot of farms back.
Yep.
I see no hands in the air. So Ben...
Okay, on that then, Tom,
Yes.
now I see that 90% are managing their costs by cutting fertiliser or reducing bought-in feed. So reducing their fertiliser, getting less from grass, but then reducing bought-in feed, putting less... I mean, how's that working in your opinion?
Is reducing fertiliser bills coming down to more efficient usage of it? Starting to treat grassland like the arable crop that it is, and involving the agronomist and looking at what your sward's like and how your soil is and being more accurate with it. The same with reducing purchase feed costs. There's a lot of focus on efficiency of feed, and if we can do the same thing with 1.5 kilos of purchase feed that we can do with 2, that's surely the best way to go.
So it's accuracy that's leading this.
Yes.
That's a real
accuracy.
positive in the
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah, and there's a lot of work being done in the data sector about managing what you're feeding and how you're feeding it, and trying to eliminate waste that way.
So we've seen the prices obviously being really high for the last couple of years compared to 5 years ago, something like 40% higher. What's that done on the consumer side? I touched on the consumption maybe dipping a little bit, but are you seeing any change in behaviour beside, and can that have a meaningful impact on any farmer level decisions?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a challenge. I mean, having good prices for farmers is obviously great at farm level, but we need to still put an affordable protein on the shelf for a consumer. And I think we've seen consumers that have had price challenges. We've gone through COVID, which has brought its own challenges in how people purchase product, but also the challenge of it's a protein at the end of the day, and what is our competition doing, whether that be pork or poultry, etc. So we've got to still provide a protein that people want at an affordable price, but we've got to give them the choice in that as well. So there are people that want to make decisions based on production system, the sort of the feel-good factor, whether it be environmentally, whether welfare-wise or whatever. So we've got to provide that range and choice for consumers, but at a price that they're prepared to pay. And I think what we've seen is the slight dip in consumption is people making a better, more informed choice of what they're buying, and perhaps more of an occasion. But the challenge we're also seeing is the affordability of it. People are going to the 4-quarter cuts, the mince, diced, etc. And unfortunately, the challenges we've had with the weather and the barbecue seasons and things like that have also put pressure on the system. So it's a really, really fine balance to make sure that we're producing the right product for the consumer, but also getting that right on farm. And the diversity and variability we have on farming systems, breeds, and everything else that goes with that is a real challenge to try and get that into a consistent quality product day after day.
Can I ask Mel a question?
Yeah.
So Mel, it was saying here that only 20% of farmers are using data capture tools, which for you is obviously a massive opportunity. Can you say, I really don't know the answer to this, of the farmers that are using Herdwatch, how many of them are actually inputting weights into your system?
Not that many.
Do you know, have you got a view on why?
Is it people don't have the facilities? The grant hasn't come through yet, so they haven't bought this fancy weight head. this fancy wayhead that they don't actually know how to use either. A lot will kill by look, feel, age, but not by weight.
Right.
It's of the farmers I've spoken to, I've asked why are you not weighing? It's we send them to kill at 18 months, or we send them to kill at 24 months, or this is basically how we've always done it. It always comes back to that. This is how we've always done it. Well, great. But your business needs to move forward. You can't stay and grow as you are.
So here we are as an industry. We've been asked to reduce our carbon footprint by 25%. We can do that by efficient use of data and killing cattle earlier and at the right time, and yet somehow we're not able to do that in our heads, let alone on our farms.
Yeah.
There's a lesson for the industry in there, I think.
Yeah.
Stuart, when we were discussing this the other day, you said that this is the challenge perhaps for people who don't understand key metrics like live weight gain. If they're trying to expand at a time when input costs are going up, that's when the cash flow issues start, isn't it?
It is, yeah. What you're finding is they're trying to finish cattle, and they try and push them maybe too hard and go over the efficiency of the animal. And this is where it comes back to Mel with Herdwatch, or any data capture. Data capture is key. Obviously, we can put a ration together, or anybody can put a ration together. That's what the animal should be doing, achieving. Is it? Yes, you can look at it visually, but if you data capture, you can see if it's achieving the 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, whatever you're trying to achieve. If it's not, then you can start looking at it, and that's where you drive efficiencies and move things forward. But without data, you're not going to be able to do it. You don't know. Some people weigh it as it comes in, weigh as it goes off, just so they know they've got a killing out percentage, or it's put on that. Yes, maybe don't do it every month because you've got the lag of weighing the animal, but you need data capture to see if that performance of that animal is achieving what you're feeding. So there's no point overfeeding it, there's no point underfeeding it. It's hitting that target that you're wanting to achieve for growing, finishing, whatever stage, whether that be in stores, finishing, or even suckle animals as well, sort of thing. So it's utilising cost per kilo live weight gain, data capture, and see if they marry up. If they're not, that's where things need to change.
And John, the grants that are available for some of this kit, have you got sight of what the uptake of that's been like, or of the scheme as a whole?
The short answer to that is I don't have the details to hand, but I think the important thing is we are opening up grants to support farmers on a whole range of opportunities, both capital grants and new technology, and the government is really pushing this new technology. You look at what the New Zealanders and the Australians are doing in terms of data and use of data and how they manage their herds. I think there's so many things we can learn to improve and develop. So the fact is we are offering these grants now at reasonably good grant rates. I can't tell you what take-up is, but I hope that take-up will be good, because I think, again, it's another opportunity to improve the way that farms work, improve the quality of their animals, which can only be good for both the industry, for processors and consumers.
Just want to ask you about the food security index that's been developed. Is that a part of your team, or are you contributing to that? So beef, we're about 90%, I believe, self-sufficient.
Yep.
We want to maintain broadly as self-sufficiency as a whole in the UK at current levels, which is about 70% as a whole.
Well, okay, first of all, the Food Security Index was announced by the Prime Minister. The first one would be published at the next Farm to Fork Prime Ministerial Summit, which is coming up soon. There's no date yet fixed. I think there's a subtle difference here between food security and self-sufficiency. So in terms of self-sufficiency, beef about 90%, eggs 93%, lamb 105%. Poultry, if we ate more brown meat, would probably be close to 100%. Pork, 70% we produce, but again, we only eat 40%. So For self-sufficient, there are different things in different sectors. For food security, this is about the overarching amount that we produce domestically and we import. That's about 63%, has been around about that level for a number of years now. The government has committed to try and retain that sort of level, so around 63%. But of course, we want to strengthen the productivity of the domestic food market to ensure that we can continue to produce good quality food around about that level. But we have an economy that relies on a secure network of imports. We have consumers that like oranges and pineapples, which we can't grow here. So there are certain things we're always going to import, but it is about strengthening and securing that sort of level around 63%. Targets are not great, of course, because it's going to influence, but as we've seen this year, on the weather, on farmers' own decisions. We're not here to dictate to farmers what they should grow, when and how much and where. I don't think that's a good thing. But there is an importance, as we've seen, because the last few years with the geopolitical problems with Ukraine and the like, and now the Red Sea, the import routes are not as secure as they used to be, and supply chains are a bit more flexible. Even last year, there was rain in Spain and drought in Morocco, which threatened vegetable supplies. So it's about making sure not just we look at and try and maintain that overall food security, but doing as much as we can below that. You know, the whole thing about alternative incomes for farmers who manage in the environment of the landscape, productivity and technology grants to try and improve the way that farmers can work and improve on farm, and the animal welfare pathway as well. There's a productivity issue there, to have a free vet visit, to look at reducing endemic diseases, and also to improve the quality and the welfare of animals on farm, which again, improving an animal that's ill or diseased is lost income. So again, just looking at that across the board. So it's what we do underneath to support that sort of maintenance of that food security level. And the first security units will be published when the next Prime Minister Farm to Fork Summit takes place very soon.
Just to jump in and ask another question off the back of that, to the most important person in all of this is the end consumer, the person buying that plastic tray in Tesco on a Friday night. The two things you mentioned there about improving welfare and improving benefits to the environment, from what you've seen from the retailers, how important is that? And is it something that we can create value and extract profit from as a beef sector?
That's a challenge one. I mean, it's really important. At the end of the day, we've got a consumer there that's more savvy of what they're buying than they've ever been.
Yeah.
They've got more information available to them through social media and everything else, whether it's right or wrong or not. But we need to give them the confidence of what they're buying delivers of what their needs are. So whether that's an environmental need or whether that's a welfare need, the two are actually becoming part of the baseline of what we're producing, because that's what everybody expects us to do. So we've all got targets around carbon, nature, biodiversity. They are set because we've got to do our bit for the planet. It's the right thing to do. The infrastructures that deliver that are sometimes quite complicated, but at the end of the day, the consumer wants to know that we're doing the right thing at all parts of the supply chain. So that's right down for farm, processing, transport, everything else. Welfare is taken as a red, effectively, that we're not setting out to cause any animal any harm at any point. We have infrastructures that have done that over the last few years to give confidence to the consumer that actually everything is all right. Our biggest challenge is the ones that don't do the job right and get caught out in various media. But the environmental thing is more and more important. And coming back to the data side of things, there's a lot of challenge down to the farms from the sort of the supply chain end going, we need more data. But we only need more data to keep proving to our consumers that we're doing a good job, because the lack of data is our biggest challenge. The lack of the ability to stand up and say, yeah, we've got a really good product, it does X, Y, and Z, is what we need to do. And we don't have that coherently. Devolution comes into that as a challenge in different sectors, having different types of information, but actually we all need to be singing off the same hymn sheet about the credentials that our product that we're producing delivers to a consumer from a nutritional point of view, from an environmental point of view, from a quality point of view, and everything else that in between. And we all need to work together to be able to do that succinctly in a way that our consumers understand. And don't forget, our consumers are influenced by 10 seconds of info. easier said than done. But without the tools that are being put in place by DEFRA to enable the data capture, the tools that like Mel has, they are really, really important in everybody being able to demonstrate what they're doing, but also for farmers to manage what they have in their own environment within their own business. Because the biggest challenge, and I think the guys talking about feed are really important here, we're managing sort of race cars. If you look at how race cars are managed, everything is managed to the nth degree. We need to get to that point where we can tweak things from a cost point of view and a performance point of view to get the best out of it. I mean, we're still living in a bit of an age where let's chuck them out in the field for the summer and see what happens. That isn't an efficient way of doing things. Not to say it doesn't work for everybody. We've got infrastructures where actually that may not be possible to change, but actually giving farmers the tools that they can use to manage their own businesses and the infrastructures, say the Farm Resilience Fund, the Prince's Countryside Fund, and all these sort of things that are available should be utilised to help. But you can lead a horse to water and you can't make it drink.
Sorry, just to add, I think data is now so important, and I think we were talking about cultural changes earlier. I think data is one of the big ones where the culture will have to change considerably, not just at individual animals or herd level, but part of the findings of all of our supply chain fairness reviews has been the lack of transparent industry-wide supply chain data that actually I think has been part of the problem why we've seen so many challenges to ensuring the fairness through supply chain. So if we can do more, and I think that's why we've introduced these grants, data is now, I think, really vital to how the industry is able to see itself and to manage itself and to demonstrate that to the wider consumer and beyond. You know, we're talking not just for here, but around the world as well.
Ben, I suppose let's close by continuing to just look at the more immediate future. We've got cow prices are really good. It looks like straw is going to be really expensive. If there's suckler farmers in the audience who are thinking maybe now is the time, not necessarily to exit beef production, but to change the system, is now the year then?
So we've got priests in the audience earlier on saying that there are empty hooks in the slaughterhouse, in the abattoir. And the reason there are empty hooks is to a greater extent because a lot of cows got killed with the high cull cow price last year. How long that is sustainable as an industry, and by sustainable I mean just to keep your businesses running, is a fairly open question. But if we keep killing the heifers and the cows at the rate we are, the likes of priests aren't going to have a sustainable business or a business that will work in the long term or even in the medium term. So I would hope that people will hold back on killing productive cows this year because there's enough gone out of the industry already.
Make the case for sucklers, please, Stuart.
Basically, there's a market for every animal, and that's what we've got to do. We've got to push suckle calves, the suckler producer, the suckle family, to basically encourage the consumer to buy into that. And that is through welfare, through higher productivity, and different marketing. And it's hard when it's in a plastic tray because they've got to make a snap decision as a consumer. So is it niche market? Not everybody can do that. Is it farm shops? Not everybody can do that. But it's basically finding a market for your animal and targeting that, but making your suckle calf cow productivity as efficient as possible.
What I would like to say on behalf of the suckler industry is the suckler cow can do things for the landscape that the dairy cow can't. And Jude Capper has got a wonderful line on avoiding carbon tunnel vision. What the suckler cow can do is, in terms of improving biodiversity and helping carbon sequestration, is something that, again, the dairy cow just can't give because they will require a slightly different kind of management in many circumstances. So there is a role for the suckler cow, and it is in maintaining and restoring ecologically diverse grasslands, as well as producing high-quality food.
But is there a sufficient premium, I suppose, or is there sufficient money in that? Even if they can do the role, does it pay to have it in the uplands? When you think about those long winters in particular.
Yeah, challenging times definitely. I think John's been alluding to the support that's available, and I think we need to avail ourselves of that fully. But I'm just saying what the role of the suckler cow is going forward is is much more heavily towards improving biodiversity and carbon sequestration, I think, than it is competing on a kilo per pound basis with beef from the dairy herd.
Just to add to that point,
Yeah.
one of my most successful beef clients has a few thousand suckler cows and finishes everything. Now, they run the two businesses, the suckler business and the finishing business, separately. The suckler cow is run as low cost as possible. That's the first principle in it. They will run 400 cows per one member of staff, really cutting costs, low feed, no feed into them. But the second most important thing they've got is a consistent animal. I'm not going to mention breeds, but they've got one breed type. They use one type of bull across the back of it, and they are producing into the finishing unit wagon load after wagon load of cattle that just become peas in a pod. Now, something that came out of our initial chat about this was the number your colleague gave. You had 190 different breeds of cattle going through your killing lines in the past 12 months. I didn't know that was that many, but just getting consistency into the industry for the end consumer, which, as you said before, when they want a consistent product, has got to have such a huge impact on people's businesses.
Yeah. The huge range of diversity we have at breed level is, I suppose, challenge number one. And I'm not saying there's got to be 1 to 10 breeds, but everybody's got to find a breed that suits them, that's efficient. I mean, calves per cow per year, we should be 365 days, and we're well over 400 days of the data we know. I think that's key as well. So I think there's some real efficiencies that could work in the cow side of things, but it's also making those right breeding decisions to produce the most efficient animal you can on your system, and that will be different for different systems, different farms, but at the same time understanding we still need that consistent quality product in a tray the other end. And this isn't about saying one breed better than the other or anything like that, but it's making those sound choices based on the criteria of your farm and what breed best suits that. And that comes from a labour point of view, a capital investment point of view, and everything else up the supply chain. So
We've got the Northern Irish rewarding farmers with a headage payment for 3 criteria coming down the track. By year 4 of the scheme, which starts next year, you'll only get a headage payment if your calving interval is below 385 days, if your heifer is calved down by 29 months, and your slaughter age is by 26 months. So the Scots introduced calving interval as a criteria for the beef support scheme up there from next year. There's been a lot of chat about that. Is that a route for the industry here? Would you like to see the government actually incentivising any of that?
So we do know that we need to reduce our carbon footprint of beef by 25% by 2030, or 30% by 2050, I think it was. And a way to do that is to cut out the inefficient cattle. So if we could manage to carve up cows at 2, keep to a 365-day calving pattern, reduce the slaughter age, take out that extra overwintering that's probably unnecessary, then we can hit all those targets to help the supermarkets and the retailers, all of the retailers, sell our products. Because they've already pledged that they're going to cut the carbon footprint of the shopping basket. So we've got to help them make our products be part of that shopping basket. So yes, I do think that's not a bad way to start targeting support.
Final question then for each of the panel. Are you optimistic about the future?
Yes.
Mel? Ben?
Absolutely.
Tom?
Yes.
yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, well. What a fine way to end on it then. There's a lot of folk here, and I'm sure in this room as well, who are looking forward to the challenges ahead, as well as feeling challenged by some aspects of what is happening. So I just want to close by thanking all of the panellists, with the exception of DEFRA, who have helped sponsor the project. You've been giving your money to farmers instead, so I suppose we'll allow that. Of course, that's the MBA, KW Feeds, Dunbia and Herdwatch. It's been a really interesting project to work on, thanks to the Farmers Weekly team who've helped with that as well. Please pick up a magazine and look at the results for yourself. And if you have any questions about your subscription or becoming part of the Farmers Weekly crew, then do come and speak to us at the back. Thank you very much. The next session will be starting.
I'm always needing the last word. So I just wanted to say on behalf of the NBA, thank you so much to the Farmers Weekly and the other sponsors for organising this survey. It's been insightful and brilliantly run, and I hope it's repeated in a couple of years' time so we can get trends out of it. So thank you all very much for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.